Hello, everyone, and welcome back. This is Story Sky English, and we're so happy to have you here with us today. Let's pause for a moment, take a breath, and relax together. Now, imagine a secret that remained hidden for centuries. A secret about a land that was enormous, vibrant, and full of life. A land so incredible that people sailed across vast oceans just to reach it. Today, we're stepping back in time. We're going to explore a story that changed the entire world. A story filled with hopes, hardships, bravery, and fresh starts. This is the tale of the United States of America, how it came to be, and why it continues to matter even now. So, find a comfortable place, relax your shoulders, and allow the story to unfold. But before we dive in, if you're new here, a warm welcome to Story Sky English. This is your peaceful space for learning English through meaningful stories. Stories that linger in your heart and stay with you long after you've finished listening. If you enjoy what you hear today, please hit subscribe and leave a comment below. We'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Your words mean a great deal to us. Now, let's journey backward, way back, to an era when the United States didn't even have a name. A very long time ago, before cities appeared, before roads were built, and before flags were raised, there existed a vast and breathtaking land. This land reached from chilly northern mountains down to sunny southern shores. It held wide rivers, towering forests, green valleys, and endless plains that stretched as far as the eye could see. And this land was far from empty. It was alive with people. These people had called this place home for thousands of years. They spoke their own languages, told their own stories, and lived in harmony with nature. We refer to them as Native Americans or indigenous peoples. There were countless different tribes: the Cherokee, the Sioux, the Iroquois, the Navajo, and so many others. Each group had its unique traditions, its own wisdom, and a profound bond with the earth. They understood this land more deeply than anyone else ever could. They knew the rivers, the changing seasons, the wildlife, and the plants. For them, this land wasn't something to possess. It was something to protect and nurture. And for millennia, they lived in balance with it. But far away, across a vast and risky ocean, change was brewing. In a region called Europe, people were growing curious and restless. They were searching for something new. And soon, that search would lead them straight to this peaceful and stunning land. What would occur when two entirely different worlds finally collided? That's where our real story begins. In the late 1400s, curiosity swept across Europe. People craved discovery, new places, new products, and new trade routes. Ships grew sturdier, maps became more accurate, and daring, sometimes reckless, men were ready to sail into the unknown. In 1492, a man named Christopher Columbus set sail westward from Spain. He thought he could reach Asia by going the opposite direction around the globe. He was mistaken about that. But what he discovered instead would change everything forever. He arrived on islands near a continent that Europeans had never laid eyes on. He called the people he encountered Indians because he believed he was close to India. He wasn't. Yet his voyage opened a door that could never be shut again. Following Columbus, more Europeans flocked to the New World. Spanish explorers ventured through the south, and French explorers pushed through the north. And they all witnessed the same sight: a land overflowing with resources and endless potential. News spread rapidly across Europe. A new world awaited across the ocean, and everyone wanted a share. But the people already living there, those who had called this land home for thousands of years, were never consulted. They were given no choice. And that's a truth we must carry with us as we continue this story. History always has more than one side. Among all the European nations, England was most determined to establish a lasting presence in this new territory. In 1607, a group of English settlers arrived at a spot they named Jamestown, now part of modern-day Virginia. These weren't soldiers or royalty. Most were ordinary folks, men hoping to strike gold, begin fresh, or simply stay alive. But the early days were brutally hard. The terrain was foreign. The weather was harsh. Food was scarce, and illness was rampant. During the first year alone, over half of them perished. It was a grim and hopeless period. Yet those who endured didn't surrender. Slowly and painfully, they mastered farming and adapted to life in this unfamiliar place. Some received aid from Native Americans, who showed them which crops to plant and how to find food. Without that assistance, Jamestown would have collapsed entirely. And yet, even as they accepted this kindness, the English settlers kept claiming more and more land that wasn't rightfully theirs. This is one of the painful ironies at the core of this narrative. Bravery and endurance on one hand, and loss and unfairness on the other. The English continued to arrive. More ships, more families, and more tiny towns gradually appearing along the eastern edge of this massive continent. Something new was taking shape. Something unprecedented and no one could yet predict what it would eventually become. Over the next century, increasing numbers of English settlers made their way to America. By the early 1700s, 13 distinct colonies had formed along the eastern coastline. A colony is a region governed by a distant country. These 13 colonies were all under English rule, and the inhabitants were called colonists. They came from various backgrounds and held different beliefs. Some sought religious freedom, while some came looking for work and land. Some were brought against their will, enslaved Africans who had no say and no liberty. This stands as one of the darkest chapters in American history, and it's vital that we don't overlook it. Slavery was a grievous wrong that inflicted immense pain and left scars that persisted for generations. Still, for numerous colonists, especially those who arrived willingly, life in America felt full of promise. The land was vast, and opportunities appeared genuine. Gradually, a fresh identity started to emerge, viewing themselves not merely as English subjects, but as Americans. They constructed towns, farms, houses of worship, and schools. They set up local governments where everyday citizens could have a say in decision-making, something quite unusual for that era. Life was tough, yet it carried a quiet sense of hope and possibility. And as the colonies grew stronger, wealthier, and more self-assured, they began posing a question that would soon rock the entire world. If we're capable of governing ourselves in our towns and fields, then why should we answer to a king across the sea? In the 1860s, tensions were mounting between the American colonies and England. England had poured enormous sums into wars around the globe, including conflicts that impacted the colonies. Now, the British government decided the colonists ought to contribute financially through taxes. A tax is money that citizens pay to the state. England started taxing everyday items: paper, glass, paint, and most notably, tea. The colonists were outraged, and their fury wasn't merely about money, it was about principle. The colonists had no representatives in the English Parliament, the very body making these tax decisions. They had no voice, no vote, and no influence. So they repeated a powerful slogan over and over: no taxation without representation. In other words, you can't impose taxes on us if we have no say in the matter. Anger smoldered and grew like a fire sparked from a single ember. In 1773, a band of colonists in Boston made a daring and dramatic move. Under cover of night, they boarded English ships in the harbor and hurled hundreds of crates of English tea into the chilly, dark waters. This act became known as the Boston Tea Party. It wasn't really about tea. It was a statement, a bold and unmistakable warning. The colonists were prepared to stand up for their rights. England received the message, but instead of easing up, they tightened their grip. That decision would ultimately cost them everything. The year 1775 marked a decisive shift. Armed conflict erupted between English troops, known as British Redcoats for their vivid uniforms, and American colonists. The opening shots rang out in small Massachusetts towns called Lexington and Concord. In those early days, no one could say for certain where the fighting would lead. Some colonists still wished for reconciliation with England. But one man was looking much farther ahead. His name was Thomas Jefferson. He was a writer, a philosopher, and a deeply layered individual, filled with noble ideals, yet, like many of his era, deeply imperfect. In 1776, Jefferson sat down and penned one of humanity's most significant documents. He named it the Declaration of Independence. In clear, stirring language, he declared that all people are created equal, that everyone holds the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These weren't empty phrases. They were a commitment, a vision for a new kind of nation. On July 4th, 1776, the 13 colonies formally declared their independence from England. They were no longer colonies. They were a new country. They named it the United States of America. But declaring independence was merely the first step. Now they had to win it on the battlefield. A ragtag, under-equipped colonial army had to take on one of the mightiest military powers on Earth. The odds were stacked against them. George Washington wasn't flawless. He made errors and lost battles. There were bleak moments when all hope appeared lost. But he possessed something immeasurable, the gift of holding people together when everything around them was crumbling. During the brutal winter of 1777 to 1778, Washington and his troops camped at a site called Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. Conditions were dreadful. Food was meager. Many soldiers lacked shoes, even in deep snow, and disease swept through the encampment. Thousands died, not from enemy fire, but from cold and starvation. It was the Revolution's darkest hour. And yet, Washington remained. He walked among his men, shared their suffering, and refused to yield. Gradually, the army began to rebound. Assistance also arrived from unexpected quarters. France, England's longtime rival, chose to back the American cause. French soldiers and supplies crossed the ocean to reinforce the colonists. With that support, the tide began to turn. After years of conflict, after so much anguish and sacrifice, the turning point finally arrived. In 1781, the British Army was cornered and defeated at Yorktown, Virginia. The war was over. The United States of America had secured its independence. It was one of history's most improbable triumph. A fledgling, uncertain nation, still charting its course, had toppled a mighty empire. Now the real challenge lay ahead. Winning a war is one thing, but building a nation is an entirely different matter. After the Revolution, the new country's leaders confronted enormous hurdles. They had to construct a government, a functioning legal system, and a leadership structure from scratch. In 1787, America's brightest minds assembled in Philadelphia for what's now called the Constitutional Convention. Figures like James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, and Alexander Hamilton debated and disagreed for months. They had plenty of differences, but they united around a common aim: to create a just government that safeguarded freedom and could never devolve into tyranny. The outcome was the United States Constitution, a document outlining precisely how the government would function. It established 3 branches so that no single individual could amass absolute power. It protected citizens' rights and forged a system, imperfect but remarkable for its era, that has endured for more than 2 centuries. George Washington became the first president of the United States in 1789. He was chosen not out of ambition, but because he had earned the nation's trust. When his presidency ended, he willingly stepped aside and returned to private life. That peaceful transfer of power stands as one of the most pivotal moments in American history, setting a precedent for every leader who followed. The nation was young and fragile. It carried deep contradictions, especially the grim reality of slavery, a wound that remained unhealed. Yet, something had been created that the world had rarely witnessed before. A country founded not on monarchy or faith, but on an idea. And so, dear friends, we reach the close of today's journey. We've traveled through centuries and across oceans. We've heard the voices of indigenous peoples who cherished their land, explorers who braved unknown waters, everyday men and women who yearned for a brighter future, and leaders who prioritized courage over comfort. The story of America's beginnings isn't simple. It isn't all glory and greatness. It holds beauty alongside darkness, bravery alongside injustice. And perhaps that's the most essential lesson of all. True history is honest. It reveals both what people did well and where they went terribly wrong. We learn from both. And to you, my friend, you who are learning English right now through this calm, peaceful story, I want you to know something. Every time you listen, you're on your own journey, a journey of discovery. Just like those early settlers who faced the unfamiliar and pressed on, you're doing exactly the same. English may feel challenging at times, strange or distant, but you're here, you're listening, and that means you're already advancing. This is the very reason Story Sky English exists, to be your companion on this learning adventure, guiding you gently through every story we share. If today's tale touched your heart, or if you picked up a new word or two, we'd be truly grateful if you left us a comment below. Tell us what spoke to you the most. We read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe to Story Sky English so you'll always have a new story waiting whenever you're ready to listen. Until we meet again, keep your ears open, keep your curiosity alive, and never stop moving forward. You're doing brilliantly, and we're so proud of you.